Welcome to our web exclusive. I'm Mike Montecalvo, along with Eyewitness News analyst Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio. A lot on the docket today, but General, we want to start right off and talk about some local troops. I know there's a group of 800 of them from the 103rd. Some of them have been deployed this week.
Yeah. And there was a composite force of about 800 that would have been deployed between several months ago and up through the end of the year. Last week, the total 7th Transportation Company went out. In the past day or so, we had another group from the 103rd Field Artillery, part of that 800 that were deployed also. So in the next several weeks, we'll see the balance of the 800 going out, and they'll be on duty for about 13 to 18 months duty somewhere in either Kuwait or Afghanistan.
Okay, all eyes really on the NATO conference that's going on right now, and we're hearing from the president of Iran. And basically, General, he has issued several challenges to the United States and the world, but clearly he's zeroing in on the United States. And basically he's saying the future belongs to Iran, and he's challenging us to accept his country as a major player in the world. Is Iran a major player?
Well, I think it is. You know, Iran has to be reckoned with as being a very important country in the Mideast. It certainly has a lot of political impact there as it relates to that whole general area. But I think what we're seeing here as far as Ahmadinejad is concerned, if you've noticed, and we talked about this earlier, he has obviously hired someone in PR to give him a better presentation. He's cleaned up his act. He looks like he should be more credible than he has in the past, perhaps a little more shaven, a little more tidy as far as his clothing is concerned. And I think he's doing that not to change his message and his philosophy, but to gain a better image and capability that he wants to be looked at as a credible individual, that when he says something, he wants to be believed.
So he is more articulate right now. It's the gray suit, no tie.
Absolutely.
Will that help him with other countries right now?
I think so. You know, when you're on the world stage, as he is, as most major players are, you need to be looked at as someone who's, if you're saying something, you not only have to look the part, you have to sound the part, you have to be articulate and knowledgeable as to what you're saying. If you take any one of those ingredients out, you certainly dilute your message. So I think he's probably hired himself a pretty good PR individual to clean up as to how he's looking, how he makes a presentation, how he's looked upon by the rest of the world.
Well, President Ahmadinejad says that his country is only looking for peace, a solution to peace, and the nuclear weapons that he's using is not for war. However, he keeps turning away NATO inspectors.
Yeah.
So how do the two go together?
Well, I think we need to look at what has happened in the past as far as the strategy and methodology that he's using was used exactly the same way by Saddam. 13 years he did the same thing. You know, you can't come in here, we'll determine what you can look at, you can't go here, and we're doing this all for peaceful purposes. You know, and he said publicly they don't want nuclear weapons. Well, at the same time, he has said openly and publicly that he wants to destroy Israel. So if you are looking at a philosophy where you want to take out another country, you certainly need some comparable weapon system that's going to be able to do that. So if you put two and two together, it doesn't take much to see that perhaps what he's saying isn't necessarily true.
Well, this week at the conference, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and other U.S. officials, actually officials from around the world, are asking Iran to come to the table to talk about the nuclear program to prove that it is a peaceful one. He is balking at that idea. So, you know, a couple of minutes ago, we're talking about him, changing his image, looking the part, and then when they ask him to come to the table to talk, he's refusing. So is he contradicting himself here?
Absolutely. You know, what you're doing is you're trying to portray yourself, in his case, himself, as a credible individual. I want peace, and this is only for peaceful purposes. Yet, when he's challenged to come to the table and talk about his very program, he balks at it. Now, it doesn't take much to add into that. Why are you balking? In my opinion, in my analogy of it, is that if you have a program that's open and you're saying it's not for other than war making, then you should be able to say, okay, come in and look at what we have, and therefore you gain a tremendous amount of credibility across the world. Not doing that certainly leads me to believe that perhaps he's not sharing the entire program with us, which eventually could be to develop a nuclear weapon.
Well, he's defied 3 rounds of Security Council sanctions and additional penalties. So basically, obviously, he doesn't really care.
Well, you know, I think we need to look at what the sanctions are intended to do. The sanctions are intended to bring some hardship upon Iran, for Iran to do business throughout the entire world. What we're also seeing is the Iranian public, the general population, is very young compared to the United States and most other countries, relatively speaking. So when you say, is he changing? I think he's changing his methodology as to how he portrays himself to be more supportive by the Iranian general population, knowing that they don't want to see Iran in another war.
But that could be said for any younger generation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the way Iranian population is leaning, it's leaning toward the West as far as the philosophies are concerned and the kinds of things that we would normally expect from a Western civilization or a Western society. So he understands that. So he's trying, I think, to portray himself as supportive of that philosophy, yet at the same time trying to make himself being the major player as to what the rest of the world would look to and look to Iran as the leader.
Okay, it's not the only really big thing going on when you're looking at around the world. We had an unfortunate tragedy where a Black Hawk helicopter crashed. 9 U.S. soldiers were killed, and I guess Al-Qaeda or the Taliban is trying to take credit for this, and that's just an accident, right?
Absolutely. You know, as I have read about it and looked at the available intelligence, that was an unfortunate accident. And many accidents happen not only during wartime, certainly during wartime, but during peacetime too. There are a lot of accidents, and we lose soldiers. But in the case of when it happens in a war zone, the enemy, in this case Taliban, says we did it. And as long as they say it, they believe it. And if they say it enough times, unfortunately you have a great number of people who look at it only on that face value, saying, well, they must have shot it down. Well, they didn't. In this particular case, it was clearly an accident.
How do you respond if you're the United States?
You just tell exactly what happened. It was an accident. It was not shot down, and that's the response that you need to continue to put out there.
Another big story this week is the Senate Republicans blocking an effort general by the Democrats and the White House and the President to lift the ban on gays from serving openly in the military, the don't ask, don't tell policy. Is this turned into a political issue, or should it be a military issue?
Yeah, you know, I'm totally disappointed as to how this went down. You know, I understand Obama made this as a campaign promise. But at the same time, we need to understand you cannot change a culture, especially in the United States military, overnight. Therefore, we embarked upon this particular effort in the form of a study to determine that it would not have an impact on readiness. And that study was going on, and I guess it was due to be released the latter part of this year, certainly by December. The Congress bought into that for the most part. The Secretary of Defense brought into it. The chiefs of the several branches brought into it. And I think at this particular point it has gone totally political. And I don't think they're paying enough attention to the impact that it could have on military readiness.
But the President is Commander-in-Chief, so wouldn't it be political to begin with?
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you look at it from a campaign promise, in his campaign, he wasn't the Commander-in-Chief. It was purely a political campaign promise as a candidate. Now, when you're the Commander-in-Chief, you need to lay that stuff aside and look at the reality of it. Does it or does it not have an impact on the United States military readiness? That's why we took the route that we did, and all of a sudden that was pushed aside with trying to get the Senate to confirm a most recent vote, which was voted down to appeal that policy. The House voted on it, but I think what you're going to see now is because of the elections coming up, there may be a change in the balance of the Congress. If the Republicans take in, it's all but for sure that that'll never happen over the next several years anyway.
Well, you know, President Obama obviously made a lot of promises. John McCain made a lot of promises along the campaign trail. What a difference it's been. If you really go back into history and you look at, let's say, President Kennedy or President Reagan, they would really only zero in on 1 or 2 issues back then. They didn't zero in on 10 issues like the candidates are doing today. It's not just the president. Are we seeing just a different philosophy now?
No, I think what you're seeing is a reaction to the electorate out there. It used to be that you would target your message to either Republicans or Democrats, and to some extent the independents. Over the last several decades, that independent slice has gotten larger and larger. So what I'm seeing is many of the candidates are taking a shotgun approach to saying, if I say all this, I'm liable to hit somebody out there, and therefore, if I hit more than 1 or 2 individuals, I'll become more popular and obviously more electable. So I think what you're seeing is a different philosophy, shotgunning multitudes of messages versus targeting one or two specifics.
Quickly, do you see a big change in the November elections?
I think we'll see a change. I think you'll see the change of the House and perhaps even the Senate going over to Republican.
Okay. Army National Guard commander is now taking the blame for those massive wildfires, General, in Utah. The general says he allowed live fire training despite high wind warnings, and the flames actually destroyed 3 homes, and obviously dozens of people were evacuated. Obviously, this was a misstep by the general. Why did he put himself into that position?
Somebody wasn't paying attention, and I can say that anytime you conduct live firing, you certainly look at the environment, especially as it relates to high winds, when you have population around the impact zone and where you're going to be actually setting fires in reference to artillery as an example. That fire can in fact spread, especially with high winds. Somebody didn't pay attention there, and obviously when you say, okay, the buck stops here, not only the artillery commander but the major command commander, and eventually it ends up with the adjutant general, and he stepped forward and said, this is my responsibility, and he took credit for that.
All right, so he took credit for it. Now, do you see a change in command at this point?
I don't know. That's a possibility. I think when you have impacted on the state such a significant financial disaster as this is, it wouldn't be beyond the possibility that he would be replaced.
Okay, General Centracchio, as always, thank you for your time.
Good to be here.
Okay, thanks for watching.